Well, hi everyone. Kenneth Lang here with Marti Konstant. Have to apologize for this last minute because this happened last week too, and I think that Optum is trying to, give me a message 15 minutes before the internet went out, and the same thing happened today. So last week I had 2 minutes to spare. This week I have about 30 seconds over. So exhaling,
Yes.
relaxing. Welcome everyone. We are looking forward to a really great day today because after this conversation about 145, Marti and I are going to continue going over to a LinkedIn audio event. So we're very excited about that. So a little bit of background, Marti, I actually met, I'm going to say met, did we meet through Lauren, possibly Lauren Greif?
We met through
I'm
Lauren,
thinking,
right?
or do you?
Yeah. I held an event where she was speaking at it, and I think you were in the participant list. And that was my very first exposure to like 2 or 3 years ago. 2 years ago, before COVID.
And it's amazing because yeah, in that time there's so many things that we actually did in terms of networking and everything. um, I've made so many great connections and I've learned from so many people as well. I think that's such a big part of it. I'm always learning, even though I feel I know a lot about the job search process. I just think that to a very large extent, the more that we all know, the better. Now, you refer to yourself as a workplace futurist and a career decoder.
Yes, I
So,
do.
so what does that actually mean?
Yeah. So before this, I was in the technology marketing field. I was a tech exec, and it was always my role for my entire career to be ahead of what is happening. As a chief marketer, I was often making the market at the same time that I was marketing the content. It's not the most optimal place to be, but that's what happens when you're working with growth stage tech companies that grow really fast. So I was in that mindset most of my career and always curious about what's next. So as I looked at the book that I wrote, Activate Your Agile Career, I was looking at the future at that time. That book was published a few years ago, and I was basically looking in the technology world to understand an analogy that would relate to the career world. And that was applying agile principles to the management of one's own career. And I made that decision about 10 years ago and started writing about it and speaking about it. And that's pretty much what launched me into the future thinking for careers.
I want to say right off the bat, Happy International Women's Day. I mean, I didn't realize when we actually did this that it was today. But I want to, I think that, Nancy actually called this out in the chat. So I want to give credit. Yeah, greetings from New York, Happy International Women's Day. And I think what a lot of us have been doing, in addition to showing support, is just, I love the sense of a community as much as possible. And I think that we definitely have to, recognize that for sure today.
And I love seeing the women on the call today. So this is great. And just an acknowledgement to you, Kenneth. You're one of the first LinkedIn posts I saw today and yesterday. You're always acknowledging what women go through in the job search and in the workplace. And it's just so nice to have a guy that's in your court that gets it and understands it. So on International Women's Day, I would like to extend a hearty thank you for all that you do, and you help amplify the right voice.
So Jennifer asked, Janet, yesterday's event, I was on a call yesterday with Leah Turner, Ariel was on there, Andy Foote was on there, John Asperian. It was a fundraiser actually for Ukraine. We had a LinkedIn expert session, and I believe last I looked, we had 475 people on the call, and they raised I think 40,000 euros. It was a great experience, and I have to call out to Marty Latman, who's one of my New Jersey folks. He always used to say, save the chat because you never know who you're going to connect with after. So I did save the chat yesterday for this 90-minute call, and I think I'm about 1/3 of the way through the chat to try to figure out all the people there, because there's so many great connections there, and that's going to be such a great follow-up because everyone there put their LinkedIn URLs in there. Everyone there kind of just spoke. And I would say if any of you are interested, I believe Lee is putting up the recording on her website to look at it. It was just a great effort. We actually had someone from England who's actually doing the fundraising in Ukraine for the women, and it was just a great experience to be there and to listen. And I think that's such a big part of it too. Were you on that call, by the way, Marty?
Pardon?
Were you on the call yesterday morning?
I was not on the call yesterday. I knew that it was happening and would love to just add a little value to your comment about the comments. That's really where all the action happens on LinkedIn and events in general. It's the richest networking that you can do on the planet.
I know we had so many great takeaways, and we think we know a lot of stuff, but it pales in comparison to having all different experts there. So this is just great collaboration in general, because I always like to know more about what people get, how they get to this place. I started doing this when I lost my job about 2 years ago as a pay it forward thing, and it just became something which I just love doing. And being an introvert, which I am, it was really, really hard to do. In fact, I am totally freaking out about going on LinkedIn audio in a few minutes, because I remember how I felt the first time I was on Clubhouse, and I'm waiting and hoping, but that's just the nature I am. I'm just, got to take a chance on stuff.
Yeah, you got to be curious about it.
So what do you think are some of the specific challenges that women have in terms of job search that might be different from men? Because I know there are differences.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've been looking at and studying is a woman named Leslie Ford started an organization where she studies the impact of women in the workplace during COVID. She started a poll. I think she's got 2 or 3, several thousand responses. It's a very extensive survey. And the real question is, what is it going to take so that women that left the workplace during COVID, what is it going to take for them to come back? And the number one thing that always comes out on top, and it comes out on the top of all surveys, it's this idea of flexibility. And you can dig deeper. You could say childcare, having on-site childcare, or childcare in general. There's a lot of different ways, but it's ways of accommodating flexibility in ways that we didn't before. And she's brought up a lot of great content in that regard. And there's lots of people that care about that. So I'd say that's one of the big ones, the mothers.
See what? Right. That brings me the whole thing. LinkedIn they just announced the work app that you can put in between different jobs. And you can have all different things you can do there. And it's an actual work app place that you can actually say work app and list a specific reason for the work app. There's been a lot of discussion both ways, whether it's good or bad. I'm of the opinion that it really depends on the situation. But in general, I don't necessarily recommend it for everyone, but I'd be curious to get, your feelings on that.
I have a pretty strong opinion on that. And that is that it's all about your messaging, right? I have a really deep marketing background. It's all about marketing and positioning. And if you're highlighting something as a gap versus something that you're doing, it can be perceived in a way that you don't want it to be. So I think putting it in the context of a consulting business, putting it as a position within LinkedIn, or putting it in sometimes the volunteer work can be classified as a position. I'm a firm believer of putting in keywords and contribution in that way. And I'm a big believer when you start your consulting business, I started one 20 years ago, just on the side, Constant Change, and it changed a lot. And whenever I was even in between for a month or two, I was always working on Constant Change. And I think you should have a logo on there. I think Kevin Turner is a big advocate of this. Why not? It's very easy to put a logo up there. And then that way, when you put that position on LinkedIn, it pulls in this really nice icon and you look real solid in your positioning on LinkedIn.
I know that there's a couple of groups. I know Lynn Williams runs a great Philadelphia careers group, and they actually have a company page, and all the job seekers actually were employees of that page, but they list within their profiles all the things that they've done. So I think Kevin, he had three different takes. One is to actually, have a company, whether it's your own company or something you can align with. Secondarily is to, you're a consultant. Then the third thing is to use the gap. Here in New Jersey, we have the New Start Career Network, which is a wonderful organization that helps those 45 and older. And they have a group page, a company page. And I've said to everyone there, that can be your job as long as you list within the job the things that are relevant to that job, not just that I'm volunteering or I'm attending meetings, but it's all about what is it that you can, as you mentioned, it's about marketing yourself. So I'm going to actually put Kevin's comment up here. My only caution of career break is to be aware it is not valued as a position on LinkedIn, has no assigned skills, will negatively affect rankings and flexibility. Very important thing to think about. I mean, when LinkedIn actually set out to do this, I think I want to say they meant well, but I don't think they totally thought it through because of the impact it would have on hiring managers. And then even with a resume, if you put a resume down, you have the gap. What's going to happen when you apply online? It's going to have to match the profile. How are you going to answer that question on an interview? And I don't think it's necessarily something that you really want to draw more attention to.
Right. And I mean, I think people that are looking to hire people are looking for action, activity, contribution. They're looking for things that are happening. Mm-hmm. So to the extent that you can show motion and mobility in what it is that you do, the only caveat there is if you're working with, caring for an elderly parent, for instance. And in that case, I think there's ways that you can, as my friend would say, pet the elephant in the room, actually put it out there as something that was one of the, the best things that you've ever done in your career is to do this and learn about this and help in this area and really, strengthen the relationship you've had with your loved one.
I think, and I agree with that because you can turn I don't want to say a negative, but a challenge into a positive. But then at what point is it really someone else's business, what you did? I mean, I had to take a gap when my father passed. And when my mother passed, I didn't dwell on it. I don't think it's anyone's business. It didn't change who I was. And maybe I'm a little bit guarded that way, but it's what do you do with that time off? If you're doing training, if you're taking classes, or if you're networking, that's a positive. And I think it's all about how it's portrayed.
Right. So Alex has a really interesting question. Might we entertain it? He says,
is this the one, Marty?
Sense of humor. Actually, he said, Marty, with a sense of humor, know that you're a futurist, but how can you stay constant while everything else is changing all the time? I absolutely love this question, and I have a great acronym for it. The way to stay constant is really to bring your future to the present and to be thinking about that all of the time. And you do this in three ways. You challenge your assumptions. That's the overarching way that you think about it. And then you actually look at your DNA. You disrupt your model, you notice the signals and the trends, and you take action. And probably the strongest thing there is the N in DNA. If you're always noticing signals and trends, you might not necessarily do a big change, but you are handling incremental change in a way with a skill or an attitude that will keep you current and relevant all the time.
It's very, very true. I also think we don't realize inward all the things we do on a regular basis that can apply to any job you have. We just take certain things for granted every day. And I think there's so much to be said for that. I'm actually trying to get in another 3 weeks a bunch of hiring managers on the panel here because I would love to get their insight into that. We know how we feel. We know what recruiters are trying to do. I really want to talk to hiring managers. What do you really think about this? What are you comfortable saying? And I'm having trouble getting them because I don't want to go on the record, but I will get them.
One of the things that we were talking about in preparation for this event was, what are the things that you can say that will make you interesting and memorable in networking, conversations, interviews? And one of the big things that always comes up is people will say, transferable skills. I'm a problem solver. And to that I say, that's a Teflon comment. It just slips right out and vanishes into the background because everybody says that. If you say instead that you tackle the problems that everybody walks away from, that's one way of doing it. I thought about even a chess analogy. If you say something like a chess master, I analyze things and I offer if-then scenarios so that the team can make a decision in a time when a decision must be made. So just be able to take some of these things that we often say, or saying like, I'm a people person. What does that mean? So I think we have to be really mindful of the things that we say. Now, this isn't things that you necessarily put on LinkedIn. I mean, I have a spidey sense for emerging trends in my LinkedIn profile, and I put that up at the top. And that's something that's memorable. And Kevin often talks about where do you put that, at the beginning or the middle, at the end. It's debatable, and it's your point of view of where you want to do that. But how do you want to be memorable and stand out? Workplace future is just one aspect of it, but there's other aspects of it as well. How about you?
I know I branded myself as a LinkedIn introvert. I brand myself as a LinkedIn introvert because I am an introvert, and people who know me really well know. What?
I think that's a great one.
And it's funny because Lauren is the extrovert to my introvert, and we joke about this all the time because she'll be on the phone with me and she'll be running and doing 5 things, and I can't even keep up with her if she's on video. But that's the way she is, and I think all of us have a little bit of both of those in us. I want to definitely let you know, Alex Freund loves your answer, by the way. So we definitely want to acknowledge Alex for that for sure. So what has been the pushback that you think from hiring managers, in terms of why do you think that they're still trying to get that pink unicorn person there? Why do you think there's no real sense that they can hire someone with most of the skills? I mean, do you have an opinion as to why you think that's the case?
Why they're looking to check the box on most of the skills, you mean, and not really understanding how skills can be. I think it's everything to me boils down to risk. People are risk averse, and I've worked at big companies, right? I've even been a contract worker at very large, multi-billion-dollar companies. And when you go in to work there, people just don't want to take the risk and put their neck out there for something. I was one within organizations that was always willing to do that. And I got my hand slapped a few times, and it was a cost. I paid a price. However, I think the risk is always worth it. So it's really about, I think Lisa Rangel was talking about being a recruiter earlier on a LinkedIn Live. And there's certain ways that you can behave and push yourself and take that risk. I mean, she took a lot of risks in some ways, being a recruiter, doing things a little bit differently on the inside to make her mark. And I think that's what it takes. It's not, if you're going to go with the conventional wisdom, let's call it the old rules, you're not going to be doing anybody a favor. So I understand why people don't want to take a risk. It's their livelihood. It's what their boss wants. Who wants to go against what their boss wants them to do? So I would challenge the people that have it inside them to take that risk to do so, because that is where our future is.
Great answer. I'd love to see anyone have any questions or any things they'd like to share. I mean, because this is an opportunity to really kind of not only brainstorm with the two of us, but with other people here. Because what I love is the way that we all problem solve together. I think there's different aspects to job search, and I think one of the things I always talk about is that you can't shoot yourself in the foot with all the different reasons you don't think you're going to get hired, because you just defeat that purpose right off the bat.
Right, right. So I don't think there's a lot of questions on that. So we can riff on that. So
no, we can definitely keep talking. I mean, for sure. I think what I find most interesting is that here in New York, at least, in this area, they're starting to list salaries, or they're going to start to list salaries on job specs. So it's not so much a game anymore where you have to ask. The question that we have is, how is that range going to be defined? Is it going to be by a percentage? Is it going to be by a number? But at least it's a start, because no one likes to talk salary. No one wants to do that. But if I know going in that
yeah,
I won't waste anyone's time.
No one wants to talk salary, and everybody wants to talk salary. Everybody wants to think it. They want to know it. They want to make an informed choice. I think it is that type of transparency is fair game. Now, from the hiring standpoint, not all candidates are alike. Certain people have, certain types of capabilities that are going to make them more valuable at the higher end of that spectrum. And so I can understand the reluctance to not wanting to publish that, but I think there's got to be a baseline. I mean, no one wants to walk into a role and think that, oh my gosh, I'm being paid 20% less than I should be, because they're not going to stay that long.
No. So I have there's a question here that says, the unicorn still exists. How do we move the needle to job automation and automated tracking systems?
So how do we, in trying to understand that question, is, do they mean to circumvent it or to integrate it? What do you think that means?
Well, I would probably say circumvent it to some extent, because, there's different things you can be knocked out all different ways on an ATS. I mean, they're doing it, I don't want to say to set you up to fail, but you want to put your best foot forward, but yet these ATSs are still a part of the job search. So if they want like 10 different skills and they ask for your experience on 10 different skills, and you don't have 10 different skills, and that knocks you out, I mean, it's just one of those things. I mean, I think that's kind of the tone of the question.
So I have a point of view on that, but it's not going to address the ATS circumventing, but it is going to talk about the future. It's going to talk about the future, and it's going to talk about artificial intelligence. I attended a session last week.
Get around things.
Yeah, so I attended a session where some organizations are starting to, instead of doing all of these questions and the resume, they actually have a smaller set of questions that don't take that long. And instead of funneling you to the one job that you think you might want, they take the results of that and analyze 5, 7, 10 different roles that you might be capable of. Now, that's a future concept, and it is happening. Some organizations are using this. I'm doing some research on this right now. And I think it's really smart, because, I know people that are interviewing at places like Apple and Google, and they're not getting that role. And they have really, really strong competencies, maybe cybersecurity, something like that, that's really in demand. Yet they go down this one long path. And yet, if they knew that they were capable of 7 or 8 positions based on their background, and one of the examples they used was, for example, when you're in financial services, when you start out as a financial analyst, and you have a certain kind of background. Well, there's a lot of people with philosophy and marketing backgrounds that might be excellent for those roles. And in the past, there was a career path. And what this is doing, it is circumventing the conventional career path. I worked at Apple for a very short time when I was in business school. And one thing I will tell you, I met philosophers and music people that were working in the technology sales role. They didn't have the typical backgrounds. And this was way back when. And I just think that's the way that it needs to be. What are your talents and what do they fit in?
So Joey brings up a good question. He wanted to know, what's your thoughts about many generations working together in the workforce?
This is a great one, right? It's 5 generations in the workforce. I think there's it's a hot area, right? So Lauren Greif had Hannah Grady Williams on, who is defining the difference between a digital analog and a native digital and a native analog. And so Kenneth, you and I would be a native analog. Anybody over 35 really is a native analog. It's people that were born with any exposure at all to the old way, the analog way of doing things. So it could be the Dewey Decimal System in libraries. It could be all kinds of things that people that were born later have no exposure to at all. And so in that interview last week, I just thought it was really compelling that you could see the beauty of dovetailing all of these generations together. It is possible, but I will say that you have to engage in some uncomfortable conversations. There were people that were uncomfortable in that label, right? Above 35, below 35. That might be uncomfortable, but the point wasn't to label. The point was to say that people that were born in a certain time have no relationship whatsoever to the world as someone that is in a different generation knows it to be. So they do all of their engagement online, all of their processing, digital purchases, all of that is done online, as an example. So I'm really intrigued by the possibility of that. And then the other answer to that is that if you don't cross-pollinate your teams with the multiple generations, you're going to risk getting stale, and you're not going to have access to those rich, innovative solutions. The Medici effect, written by Franz Johansson, talks about the importance of diversity on teams and working at the intersection. And I think when you are working in multiple generations, you are working at different intersections that you worked at before. So that's my 2 pieces that I'm interested in right now in multi-generational. I think it works. I think the organizations themselves are going to have to get a little bit beyond this so that they can offer the roles to all of the generations, because the 5 generations are still working.
So I know that I'm going to pull this up. She also calls herself doing a lifelong learner. She's taking online classes, etc. She's building out a website. I would recommend everyone here build their own website out for sure, because it's good practice. But she may change her name. She wants to know what to change her title to. Jackie of all trades consultant. I think, one of my answers is with your job title can be the job that you want. It doesn't have to be like, if I'm a business analyst and if I'm in between, that can still be my job, as long as I recognize within the confines that I'm in transition or I'm doing other classes and things, because that's the job title is searchable, with whatever you do. And that's one of the reasons I'm not go ahead.
Yeah. So I would say this takes a lot of research. So I don't have the perfect answer for you, Dawn. I love what you're doing. I love that you're integrating this idea of lifelong learning. I would encourage you to extend this idea beyond lifelong learning. What does that mean? And really research a lot over what the titles of the future. And I'll give you an example. It's not current, but you'll get the point. There was a point in time when you actually were, you had a role in marketing, and it was marketing manager, marketing director, VP of marketing. And then there was a point in time when digital crossed the divide and you had to dip into it. And I immediately adopted the word marketing technologist when it became an option. And so my boss didn't give me the marketing technologist title. I named myself the marketing technologist and promoted myself that way, and was hired in Silicon Valley and contract work and all kinds of opportunities because the marketing technologist. So let's take a look at all of the popular titles. Maybe there's things that are related, to AI. Maybe there's something related to the future. But I think the answer is there. And I think the wordsmithing would probably only take about a half hour of brainstorming with a handful of people that could support you in that brainstorming to come up with something that makes sense to the market.
I know the one change I've seen in the workforce is people are more willing to ask questions and not be afraid of getting the "you should know that" answer, because it's a much different engagement now. There's so much information out there. How can you learn and know everything? And yeah, I can some of it up online, but I think asking people of our age have certain skills that people of my kids' age have, and you want to collaborate because there's strengths to both.
Right. So I think one of the things that I always talk about, because I used to manage PR and marketing, everything about marketing, and I think the yes and is just a powerful answer to many questions, or that depends, and bringing up an analogy that's related to what the question is talking about. Maybe you're not answering the questions. Like, you might even just be as honest as saying, I don't know exactly about that one. However, when I was working on this was my experience, and offer it, give them an answer. And if you just flat out don't know, it's not important to, to actually take too much liberty with the truth. So I think, having an honest conversation about that. And then the other thing, and I remember this from a mistake I made years ago. I said, I didn't know how to do something. And I thought over and over again how I could have answered that question. And the way to answer that is, I haven't done that, but if I were in that situation, this is how I would handle it. And I've observed in the industry that this is how this leader handled it, or this is how this colleague handled it. And I would adopt that framework in my answer.
I had that happen to me once too. They said, "Do you know how to do this?" And I said, "Yes," without even thinking. And then I realized afterwards, I had no idea how to do this. I was just saying it. And the hardest thing for me to do was to go back to my boss and say, "I really don't understand this." And thank God he was somewhat supportive, but he was like upset because the time that was wasted with his assumption that I would do everything. And so I've learned over the years, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to say how you phrased it makes a lot of sense. For sure. It's not just, I don't know, duh, but it's like, you bring it to things you may have done before. And I actually, in the very beginning, would ask on LinkedIn. There were groups on LinkedIn, and I'd actually post a question on a LinkedIn group and get the answer to something, which was, because back then groups were really great and it was very easy. I think even with job search or anything else, ask people, ask us, ask each other, because there are only a certain number of ways to get a job, but it's how you portray it and what you say to get you to that place.
Yeah, and here's a really good answer. When you don't know the answer to a question, I'm thinking about, well, we're talking about questions, right? And maybe that's something that you're really good at. Maybe you're like the best customer client success person. And maybe you say something like, I'm the go-to person to bring to a meeting when a customer is upset about something. And the reason they bring me into the meeting is I always ask the extra question. So you're actually showing your curiosity about what you care about and what you want to learn about, and you want to help customers. So you're demonstrating that. There's that you can do as well. So I think there's a lot of different ways. I call it the wordsmithing. I call it career brand phrases, but there's a lot of things you can say that you're not being dodgy. You're just crafting a story that makes sense, that's in context, and shows your curiosity and your creativity and your problem solving capability.
I think it's even more, it's especially true when you're in a meeting and they ask, are there any more questions? Everyone's afraid to ask a question sometimes because it used to be, I don't want to ask the stupid question, or I don't want to be laughed at. But if you don't ask the question, you never know, because it's only a stupid question if you think it is. The old saying, there's no such thing as a stupid question, is absolutely true. You have to be willing to be part of the discussion.
Right. Absolutely. So Kyra was saying about the multi-generational environment is to recognize the strengths of each generation. And so I think, Kyra, you're spot on when it comes to the integrating the ability, let's call it reverse mentoring for now, that there's things that you can learn across the generations, and that the leadership, I mean, that's what came across in Hannah Grady's interview with Lauren Greif. Is she said there's things that we don't know about leadership that we can benefit by having a conversation and some internal coaching. I think this idea of internal coaching within an organization is phenomenal. It's a combination of mentorship. Yes.
Just looking here, Dawn, I was separated a week before Christmas, and what I learned from that is no one gets gifts this year. I'm joking here. It is true. Is that honest? Is that something that you would ever bring up? Maybe.
So this is being honest and just saying that you lost your job before Christmas. Is that what you're saying, Dawn?
Well, no one gets gifts this year is the end of it. I mean, if you want to elaborate, I guess the question is, how honest can you be without being coming across, the wrong way, I guess.
Yeah, I think you have to test it for yourself. I think, I married a funny man. He used to do stand-up. So there's certain things that he can say in meetings that are just lovely and fun. And there's certain things when I try it on for size, it doesn't work. So the thing with, the gifts and all that, before Christmas, no one's getting gifts. It just depends on how you feel about it. I mean, I do a lot of professional speaking, and I am testing out my sea legs on things that I can say that are appropriate and don't offend. And so you just have to try it on. I mean, I talked about taking a risk earlier. Is it horrible to take a risk, to try something out? No, it isn't. But there is a risk when you're trying something out that you haven't done before, that you typically don't do. But I think that there's the humor is the great. It evens out the playing field if you can see the humor in things, and if you can add a little bit of it.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Marty. I think we're going to sign off in a couple of minutes so we can get prepared for the next part of this. I hope everyone here joins us at 2:00 as we go on our LinkedIn audio first run. And if you've never been there, for sure, just hang out for a little while. Just try it out. You can do it either on your phone, or you can do it on your tablet, or you can do it on your laptop. For those of you that were never on Clubhouse, this is what we used to talk about. It's the ability to engage and listen. Think about it as a podcast. You can be doing other stuff at work or other stuff at home, and you can listen to us, have a great time. So next week, we have Hanan Isaacs, who's an employment attorney. If we're very interested in people have questions about that, let us know, because he has a much different perspective about the right things and wrong things. And we both come from the same hometown in New Jersey, which we didn't know until many years ago, until we first met. So everyone, have a great day, everyone. talk to you soon, whether it's next week or in an hour or on LinkedIn. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for your participation, everybody.